So another founder in car, and today we will discuss what can help you out in summer. So oftentimes in summer, of course, it is a lot warmer, and this can also be detrimental for your experience in the car or for the car itself. So for example, the latter category, that's not so much there, but I just give it to you now. So if you have a car that has cooling problems, then the heat, excessive heat, can damage the engine, of course. In the past, for example, when they had limited cooling capabilities in the summer, people that love their car put the heater inside on maximum to extract as much heat as possible from the engine bay, even though it was very hot inside. So you can imagine this is not a nice thing to have. Another thing to consider is that especially during the summer holidays, when it's also warm, people go with the car to their vacation destination, and it also leads to enormous traffic jams, and those enormous traffic jams will increase the heat even more, because normally cars cooling to a great amount by means of driving air exposure, and that's not there in traffic jams. So there's also another thing that could have a detrimental effect on your car. And also, oftentimes when they drive to holiday destinations, they also go to more hilly terrain, so more slopes and descents, and the slope up will ask a lot of the car, especially when it's fully packed and a full family and all the stuff is in the car, and it is very hot. So then it is good to shift down a gear or two to give the engine more cooling power, and also allow it to brake on the engine more when you descend. So why do I do this in descents? Because if you have to use the brakes all the time when you're going downhill, they will also overheat and fade, and then you will lose braking power. Whereas if you also brake through the gears, this will will put a little bit more strain on the engine, of course, but will reduce the strain on the brakes, so you have multiple sources of braking, so engine braking and the regular braking. Another thing is that oftentimes also the brakes will overheat, of course, because they are so heavy packed, and then the descents are that much. So there are some things to take into consideration. With nowadays so much luxury in all the cars, almost all the cars, it is a lot more pleasant for the passengers. I remembered when I was sitting in the back seat of my father's car and we went on holiday that I had heat allergy, because it was so hot, and you can turn all the windows down, of course, but when you're sitting in the traffic jam, this will not help. This will not help because you don't have driving wind that much, and the heat is everywhere, and you're sticking together with your brother and your grandma, because we also took a grandma with us in a small car, Toyota Starlet, I think the second generation. So you can imagine father, mother, two sons of teenage or older age, and the grandma. There was quite a lot of people in the car. So, but nowadays we have airco, for example, which is just enormously beneficial additional option to have in your car. Not only for resale value, but it will help you in the cold, that it gets the moist out of the air, but also in the heat it's a source of cooling. Even when you're stagnant in a traffic jam, you still have your airco with you. So this is a very good development. And also the rest for heat is not so much a big deal. I think that if you have a car that has a lighter colors, like this, my Suzuki Swissport is white, you have the most deflection of heat, whereas with a darker color, for example black, you have the least deflection of heat. So you can take that into consideration. Some modern cars, especially electric cars, have the ability to cool the car before you're starting with your trip, which can be a good thing, of course, or heat them when needed in winter. As long as they are connected to a power source, so they get electricity, that's not a big deal. If you have not a connection, then it will also drain the battery, of course. So those are the major things to consider when having a car trip in excessive heat, especially with your family. Also take enough stuff with you. So for example, you can take some additional blankets and put them in the windows. When you are stagnant or your car tends to overheat, you can use that reflective paper to cover the front windows, because it's the biggest part that it will just be used as a magnifying glass to get your car to a very high temperature to begin with. And you can also never go wrong when you take enough drinking water. So when you get stranded, you still have at least drinking water to sit you out. And also, if you're not getting stranded but you're able to sip now and then from a drink, even if it's not that cool, this will help your body lose heat. So for example, that example of heat allergy will then be reduced, of course. Another thing to consider is that when you are going for a large trip and you are sitting shoulder to shoulder every time with a lot of people, then of course you will have it a little bit warmer than when you are driving with a little bit less people, or you put some layers in between the person sitting in the back seat. But that's just a small thing. Well, I will conclude with that. Hope you have a very nice holiday travel and road trips with your car and your family. Hope this short video will help with that. Found my car out. Have a great day.